Hi, Year 12. This lecture is about observation as a research method. There are two variations, participant observation and non-participant observation. And within those, you can either do it covertly, where it's undercover, or overtly, where those taking part in the study know they are being watched or observed. Okay. The type of sociology that involves getting involved with the group and participating is what's known as ethnographic research. Okay, this literally means writing about a way of life, in the sense that the researcher takes part in the life of the people or group that is being researched. A famous example of this is the explorer Bruce Parry, and he undertook a series of visits to remote tribes to experience their way of life and to join in as much as possible. I think the series was called Tribe. A good example, which you can actually find on YouTube, is Bruce Parry's experience in the Arctic, which I think if you Google Bruce Parry Arctic and in YouTube, it will come up with his experiences with the Nanette Brigade in northern Siberia as they start their winter migration to temperatures of -40. Now, as you can see from the picture, Bruce Parry does not look like a Nanette. However, so that would mean that there's no other way that he could have gained access to that group covertly, because he could not have made himself look like that group of people. However, because he's quite clearly an outsider, what impact do you think that might have had on the validity of his research? Okay. So, as I mentioned before, there are actually four variations, I suppose, of observation. There's covert, when the researcher pretends to be an ordinary group member. Overt, when the researcher tells the group that he or she is conducting sociological research and should tell them what it's for. Participant, when the researcher is involved in all activities of the group. And non-participant, when the researcher stands apart from the group and does not take part in the activities carried out by the group. See if you can think of any examples for each of those categories of sociological research or research in education. As you have probably identified, William White wasn't entirely undercover. Okay, he actually let the gang leader know about the intentions of his research. This person was known as Doc, and he is what's known as a gatekeeper. When it comes to covert research, it often needs to be done with groups of people that don't really like the idea of taking part in studies, normally because they're involved in illegal activity. So you need to find a gatekeeper who will open the gate for you into that group. This is what's known as snowball sampling, which is a sampling method where you collect people as you go and as you meet them. It's a very unrepresentative sampling method. However, it's the only sampling method available when studying groups of people who do not want to be researched. Okay? How do some sociologists justify the covert method, so the entirely covert method? I'd like you to have a read about Lord Humphreys. How did he justify covert observation? And you need to read at the very bottom of page 209 in your textbook under practical issues. How does he justify his research? And what was it that he was researching? Another area worth considering is how does covert observation fit in with the ethical issue of informed consent? Well, it doesn't, because if you get consent, the people realise you're studying them and they will change their behaviour. Can anyone remind me or annotate what is the effect where people realise they're being watched and change their behaviour, and it is not social desirability? There are 3 stages in covert observation. Getting in, and I would like you to have a quick look at Griffin's study, Black Like Me, which is the most fascinating case of getting in and really getting yourself accepted. It's on page 210, and he is the white guy lying under a tanning lamp in order to turn himself into a black person so he could fully understand what it was like being a black man in segregated America. There's also the issues of staying in. So once you're in and you've been accepted by the group, that's fine. But you need to stay in the group. You need to make sure you don't make key mistakes that might involve you getting kicked out. And then there's the danger of getting out. So when your research is complete and you might be ready to publish your report, how do you get out? How do you disentangle yourself from all those personal relationships you've developed without causing them psychological harm, without putting yourself in danger, okay? And allowing yourself and the people you leave behind to continue a normal life without being put at risk of your study. So see if you can find any examples of getting in, staying in, and getting out. One of the best one, again, is William White's Street Corner Society, which you'll have read about. So see if you can pick out his stages of getting in, how did he stay in, and what did he do to get out. So getting in, there are several ways of doing this. They may already be a member. A sociologist may choose to do some research about a group that they're already a member, be it a member of the teaching profession, for example, or they might be a member of a sports club they might want to do some research in. They may be a member of a particular gender they want to research, men or women. They may get invited to join. If the group has formal membership, they can apply, so a golf club, or simply pay their membership fee. However, as I said before, often it involves befriending a key member of the group who introduce the researcher to the rest of the group, which is exactly what happened in William White's study. And as I said before, this is what's known as snowball sampling, being introduced to one person, then another, before you know the group really well. Second stage, staying in. At first, the researcher will tend to keep very quiet, listening and observing to what's being said and done, and gaining the trust of the group. This will be very time-consuming, which is a practical issue with observation, covert observation. They need to learn the norms and values of the group so they don't mess up when in a situation. After a while, they can become more involved in the group's activities, but keep their role as an observer. And there are plenty of examples of researchers, sociologists, making tiny errors which have actually almost got them into serious trouble when researching crime and deviance. Finally, getting out. Once the researcher has developed a close relationship with the group, it can be very difficult to leave, particularly if the research is covert. There are plenty of ethical issues with this research method, particularly when leaving a group when people actually might depend on the researcher as a friend. Imagine someone who you considered one of your very good friends suddenly upped and leave. What impact would that have on you emotionally? There's also a problem for the researcher becoming too attached to the group and going native. This is when the person doing the research stops seeing themselves as a sociologist and starts to see themselves as a member of the group they're researching, hence going native. This is very bad, as the researcher can lose their objectivity in the research. They may be way more sympathetic to the group members as opposed to the authority figures that might be trying to prevent their behaviour or what they're doing. As I've mentioned before, positivists are very critical of this research method because it involves so much subjectivity and personal opinion and personal relationships. They are very critical of the sense of the researcher going native and not being able to reach an objective decision about what they're seeing. Here are a few extracts from two studies about getting in and getting out. Okay, getting in, staying in, and getting out. You've got White's study. Also put in an extract from James Patrick's study of a gang in Glasgow, okay, where actually he left in pretty bad circumstances, and it's worth thinking about the ethical implications of that. Non-participant observation, okay? This is somewhat more favoured by positivists because the person doing the research is not getting involved, they're not influencing the outcome, so in their eyes it can be somewhat more objective. A good example in education of non-participant observation are Ofsted inspections. They generally do not get involved in the group's activities but simply observe. Sometimes they may ask questions though. Non-participant observation can be both quantitative and qualitative. So can you give me an example of what information would be quantitative, could be collected in classroom observations? What qualitative information could you collect from classroom? So numerical or rich data about with opinions and the written word. Can you also tell me how research in classrooms could be overt or covert? So Ofsted, definitely overt. But what about covert observation? How could you covertly observe in a classroom, or who's in a position to covertly observe in a non-participant capacity in the classroom? Okay, tomorrow in lesson, we're going to be looking at the pervert criteria of observation. So please don't worry about doing this now. Okay, this is probably something you've looked at before anyway. So these are some of the questions we'll be looking at in next lesson, so don't worry about them now. Thank you.